When you just first experience loss, you feel loss and you feel lost.
This is Kathleen and Poppy and Clover. Kathleen is a strong, successful educator and mother of 3. She shares with us her journey with grief and loss.
When I was 18, my older sister was 21 when she passed away. She had a rare heart and lung disease. That was just 3 months between diagnosis and her death. So devastating to be a young person and for her to be a young person and losing her life at such an early time. And then me being an only child at that point and walking with my parents through grief, even though we really didn't know what grief, how you're supposed to do it, or how temperamental it would be, or there's just, when you just first experience loss, you feel loss and you feel lost. And I remember feeling like, people were expecting me to do a certain thing, react in a certain way at a certain time, at a certain place. Sometimes I think that was a way for me to avoid some of the feelings, was to worry about how you're supposed to do it. But that was just being raw, being exposed to hard everything at a young age. I was just a freshman in college when that happened. She had just transferred as a sophomore. And then watching my parents go through grief was just super hard. So we're walking through grief, and actually I remember during that time my dad spent most of the time in the garage puttering around, and my mom and I kind of processed a lot of our emotions together, but I kind of, like, my dad was out of the picture. It was like too much for him, I think, or maybe he bowed out so we could process our grief together, my mom and I. But within a year or so and a half, it still comes back so fast. Within a year and a half of after my sister's passing, my mom passed away as well. So she had been having her own health issues that just were certainly exacerbated by the grief and the anguish. And so at that point, I think I was just sort of lost and wandering. But part of it too was like a practical sense of survival kind of kicked in, because what else was I going to do? I certainly didn't know how to process my sister's grief, nor did I. Now I had my mom's loss, and it was like my dad and I, we had to like muddle through, push through. And by then I was, 20, almost 21 at that point. And the options were to go back home and live with my dad, who was depressed, or push through, embrace my own sort of dreams as an adult and figure out my own adult life. So I pushed through. I pushed through a lot. So how did my sister's and my mom's death affect my dad? And then how did that affect my relationship with my dad? Yeah, I know that at the time, my dad really depended a lot on my mom socially for so many things. Structurally, the way our family functioned was really dependent upon my mom. And of course, when I was out of the house, I was away at college, so it was just my mom and dad at the time together in the house. And my dad, I think, was just completely devastated. He really didn't know how he was gonna move forward. He didn't have a lot of those basic family skills, parenting skills. Almost all my social or my emotional dependence was offered to me by my mom. So my dad really tried to provide, and be a support for me, but he was struggling with his own stuff. So, I think both of us just kind of muddled through. I kind of put all my energy and effort into college and graduating and big plans for my future. I was forward thinking, and I think my dad was really trying to, grasp that what his future was gonna look like, and trying so hard to, he would say things when I would come home for break. He would say things like, I realize how much your mother did around here. There's spiders everywhere, those little kind of basic things those are things he could talk about, like the practical things that he had taken my mom for granted for. It was very hard to talk about my sister. I think that was just like the bigger pain. I'm not sure my dad and I had a lot of conversations later, actually, about my sister's passing. So he must have had his own sounding board. He wasn't my sounding board. My friends really were my sounding board. But I remember so many years later, my dad lived a long life, and in his late 80s, he passed away and came to live with me and my family, my children, years later. And the thing that made me realize how dependent my dad was on me was because we kind of argued and bickered and fought. My dad and I were kind of more the arguers. My mom and my sister were more the gentle, loving, patient, and kind folks in our family. There was no irony lost on my dad and I that the two of us were the ones left fighting it out with each other. But towards the end of my dad's life, when he was passing, or very close to passing, he had been many days where he wasn't really responsive to people's voices towards the end. And when I came into the room, he heard my voice, and he emerged out of wherever he was in the depths of his process of death, and he heard my voice. He responded to my voice. He said, "Kathy, where have you been?" He just kind of came right out and met me in that moment. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, like I am my dad's lifeline to this life, and that was where I was kind of able to be present with him in his own passing, his own griefs and fear of that. But also it helped me just recognize my role and how much he loved me. He did.